Happy Thursday night, everybody. This is the South Florida Tribune podcast, and I am pleased to be joined by a friend of mine that I met over at the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches, Johnbrandes, and we call him the Sales Bounty Hunter. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. Looking forward to having a very productive opportunity to get your information out there. But before I go out there and do that, I want everybody know that the audio version of the South Florida Tribune podcast can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Please hit the red subscribe button on the YouTube South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? Participate in the chat room. That's one way to get you on with us. And also, you can send topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, call me at 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. My Twitter handle is @TribuneSouth, and our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. Candy Ebling does a masterful job keeping everything together, whether it's a broadcast, whether it's all the content, and everything that we have to offer. With that said, with no further delay, and here's the Sales Bounty Hunter, Johnbrandes.
Thank you, Scott. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
All right. Well, let me find out, John. Okay, give me an introduction of yourself and your company.
Yeah, so I've lived in South Florida for 22 years. I have 20 years of experience in hiring and building teams, and I started my business about 1.5 years ago, and just kind of kept getting pulled in the direction of recruiting. And so that's what I do is I help match talent with opportunity. I help businesses grow by finding the right people to fill roles. Those hard to find roles, especially, is what I do.
Very good. All right, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail as the broadcast progresses. So, headhunting and recruiting service. Describe what that's really all about.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell. I think most people have some awareness, right? Like if a business is trying to hire, they can, used to be back in the day, they put an ad in the paper. I'm old enough that my last job that I applied to, I answered an ad in the paper to get that. But now these days, obviously, a lot on the internet, LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, all these big platforms, businesses can post their job ads. And some businesses will have an internal recruiting team. Basically, I operate as an external recruiting team. Right. That can help businesses go out and track down the people that they need to fill those jobs.
Yeah, unbelievable how you talk about CareerBuilder and Indeed, because I used to go there an awful lot. I even went as far as Craigslist to try to find a job, and you can every now and then find one, but don't hold your breath. But they're there nonetheless. All right, so let's talk about the sales administrative law firms. These are the types of firms that you represent. You talked about attorneys and paralegal. I want you to go into detail about each classification.
Yeah, so I am situated to help really any business at this point, but the ones that I do a lot of are organizations that have a sales team where maybe they are bringing in additional people to grow the team. Administrators like office manager, an admin assistant, an executive assistant. These are all different types of folks. Even some accounting roles at times. I've been able to help get like a bookkeeper in, and then I find I do a lot of business with law firms. So whether it's hiring a legal assistant or a paralegal, or again an office manager, or bringing in attorneys. And so I've done work with a lot of different practice areas, personal injury, folks involved in litigation, real estate attorneys, all kinds of stuff. It's a lot of fun.
All right. So of these three, which one do you find to be the most challenging? I've always thought myself, you're actually recruiting for law firms.
Yeah, it can be. I'm learning a lot, about I'm sure you have a picture of an attorney, and I certainly did in my mind. But when you really narrow down and get into the difference between an estate attorney and a real estate attorney and a personal injury attorney, and then on the other side of the personal injury is the insurance defense. There's a lot of nuance there, and not a lot of overlap often between those different types. But to your point, in terms of being the hardest, the funny thing is like a lot of times you'll find the perfect person that has the right qualifications, but then when you talk to them, they don't particularly want to continue working, in a law firm or, as an attorney. I often joke about it being like, the actor that really wants to direct, right? Like there's always this sort of like aspirational wanting to get on past that. And so it's finding the right person with the right background and that, has the right attitude and wants to do, you have to have that want to, right, as well. And so it's all those pieces coming together, and it can be very, time consuming and challenging, but it's a rewarding challenge. And, my whole point of view is to, if you're a business owner, Scott, right, like to take that burden off your plate and put it on mine. And, I take care of that work, and I'm just serving up instead kind of the final product, or at least maybe a stage below the final product, so that you have an easier time going through that.
And let's talk about the paralegal aspect of things. Do you find it easier to recruit a paralegal than it is an actual lawyer?
Maybe a little bit, because there's a little less of a paralegal that is looking to change lanes, I guess. That they've already invested a fair amount. I mean, as a lawyer has invested in their schooling and everything, but they're going to be doing that work. At least in my experience, the paralegals I've talked to, of course, everybody's nice and it's easy to deal with most folks, but there's a little bit less of that. If you find the right person, again, though, there's a lot of variation there, and different skill sets with different types of law firms, or whether they've worked for a company. So it's hard to paint with too broad a brush. But yeah, you make a good point. There's there's certainly more paralegals than there are attorneys, right? That's the other thing, is that you talk about finding like a needle in a haystack a little bit.
Right.
Like there's simply fewer of them. When you're looking in some of the tools and resources that I use to find candidates, you end up finding a much higher quantity. Like, for example, if I'm looking for salespeople, I mean, it's almost like you can throw a rock and hit a salesperson,
right.
And when you get into some of the other categories, it takes a little bit more. You have to turn over a few more rocks to find them.
Well, you bring up a really cool point here. Okay, what's it like to work in the sales field? There's so many different sales occupations. Are there any ones that you limit yourself to? Because sales is about as wide open as you can get.
It is a broad category, and there's a lot, just like the different, types of attorneys and practice areas, there's a lot of different types of sales. Everything from, whether it's inside or outside, are you the kind of person who's in an office fielding incoming calls, or are you out, going door to door? And like, like we've talked about, right, there's variation and overlap in between those layers. Like, people can move from one to the other. I've never been a big fan of the idea that, like, just because you were selling business to business, that you can't now turn and go and sell consumer, B2C and go and deal with consumers now, or vice versa. I'm a big believer in the fact that a lot of those skills are transferable. But then again, I serve at the pleasure of my clients. And if they are looking for someone that has a specific background, then, that's my job, is to go out and find people that match those skills.
Well, back in another lifetime, I used to do in-home sales, and it was a one-call close situation. Do you ever run across a situation where you do one-call closes? Because I'll tell you, nowadays, I'll bet a one-call close to me is probably rare, because I think consumers are a lot more intelligent in the manner that they shop around, and they also have the resource of the internet to research more than they ever have. I mean, but back when I was doing it back in the 80s and the 90s and a little bit into the 2000s, the one call close, you have to have a tremendous amount of persistence to be able to stay in there that long.
Did you get a real charge out of closing like that and being able to accomplish it in that one call?
No question about it. I have to tell you, I could tell you stories one time where I was in a house for 10 and a half hours to write a $20,000 home improvement business. The only regret I have about that, though, John, is I never contacted the Guinness Book of World Records. I was in there with my uncle, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, and luckily the deal cleared. So otherwise it would have been 10 and a half hour waste of time. But no,
you're pot committed at that point.
Well, one day when we go to eat, I'll tell you more about it. I want to make sure we keep this as generalized focus on you. But yeah, I've done alarm systems and home improvement in the past, and they were a much different level of closing for sure. But sales is what it is. It's not. Tom Lasorda once gave me the acronym that it's not the best salesman that gets the sale; it's the one that wants it more than the next.
Yeah, persistence, right? I mean, they do a lot of studies and see that, like, the best salespeople are the ones that follow up. You're getting past that one call close, right? Or that will, even in that one call, asking follow up questions and not just taking the surface answer as the final answer, and you keep going. A no is just an invitation to ask again or to try and counter that objection in some way. I think to your point about in-home sales or door-to-door, that is a level of persistence generally, and usually you find a ambition and aptitude from that goes above and beyond the typical order taker type salesperson who's just fielding incoming requests. And so I generally look at something like that, or a lot of things people don't think. A lot of people I talk to will say, well, I'm not in sales, or I don't do sales. And I'm a big believer that almost everything has some kind of sales in it, right? Whether it's the waitress or the bartender, they have person-to-person skills that if they are not, warm and inviting, that's going to affect their tips. And that's a manner of sales. It's sort of relationship building in a microcosm, at that table or at that bar. Often, and I'm sure you've had this experience, right? Those people could sell just about anything, right? Like if they given the right amount of product knowledge and a little bit of direction. So I'm a big believer in that, in terms of, people being able to open up. And, the great thing about sales, of course, is that just like you said, if you've got that persistence and if you're willing to, go to almost any length, you can pretty much write your own ticket, and the sky's the limit. And there's a lot of jobs out there where, no matter how hard you work, you're only going to bring home that set paycheck. And I think that's the difference with sales, is that, and certainly there's a bit of, luck and the environment involved where you can have bad days, but you can also have those great days. And you come off a close like you were talking about, and you're ready to, take off to the moon. And that's, something that kind of surprised me about this. The recruiting aspect is very much a sales thing. I'm selling candidates on the positions a lot of times to, convince them that they should at least hear it out or learn more about, or, kind of spark that curiosity, transferring that enthusiasm from me to them in that regard. And then in the same fashion, when I'm dealing with clients, I'm trying to sell those businesses on the benefits of using my service, as opposed to just going at their own and dealing with the time and the effort that takes.
Well, I'll mention one other story, which I think is kind of neat. But my dad taught me a trick many years ago. Always keep the pen in your hand so that people, when they're ready to sign the agreement, a pen doesn't become a loaded weapon, if you get my drift. Okay. And he was right. He kept it out in front. But I was working in a house in Canton, Michigan. Went through the vinyl window pitch. Okay. And then I found out they didn't want it. So after all this time, what do you want? I mean, they wanted wood windows. I had to refigure the whole thing out. But here's the thing. These people kept giving me caffeine, and the more caffeine you get, I'm dangerous at that point. I mean, tonight you got me on a mellow night, but this is, but the reality is I did sell the deal for $7,500. But when they wanted siding and they didn't want me back because they were afraid that they were going to have to buy. They just wanted estimates. So, but let's face the reality. I mean, I understand that you just have to find out with your client. One of the interesting things that I've tried to tie with sales, and maybe this might be something you could gravitate to. Being a journalist myself, I've always predicated them on the 5 W's and 1 H. Who brought you in here? What are you interested in? When are you looking to do it? Why are you looking to do it? When are you going to do it? And then how are you going to pay for it? And I always knew in my mind that when I was over at the door initially, I usually know within first 10 or 15 minutes if I had a real buyer or somebody that simply wanted what they were promised, and that was a free estimate. But I took those journalistic skills and tried to go ahead and incorporate them into my thing. And then I learned the chess game, which we all are playing at some point or another. And that's how you're able to put the equation. Now, again, this is what I was learning on the fly. It worked out for a lot of years. I'm thrilled to be back in the media. I mean, this isn't selling anything. You want to get exposure. You want to build your brand, or not. Brand is just pun intended. Kidding with you.
I love it.
But I understand, again, your process. And, from one former salesperson to an individual that deals with them a lot, I think that what you do is something very admirable. And I think that a lot of people need to find out more about it. So let's talk about your client base. Okay. You indicated you have them in Palm Beach County as well as all over the country. Please elaborate.
Yeah, Scott, if you don't mind, I want to go back to something that you just said, because you really hit a nail. You hit it out of the park.
By all means, do it, John.
With sales, a big thing that we didn't talk about until you just mentioned that is the asking questions. And when I'm screening a salesperson and they start asking me questions and they're going multiple layers deep into the job, I just know that I've got a real winner there. There's a lot of times where you get them on the phone, and there's just no engagement, but a good salesperson is going to ask those questions. You right. mentioned, the who, what, why, where, and when and how, right? Like, I mean, that's just.
If you ask most of these people with the 5 W's and 1 H, I'll bet my last dollar that none of them are going to know anyways.
I think that's right.
Because nobody's going to. You think about the average individual, okay? You think they're really going to go out there and think about journalism connected to sales? Only a guy like me would come up. My dad had a hard time acclimating to it. And then here, I'll take another story about my dad who owned the company, is when I started writing agreements that were so thorough, and I mean so thorough, he said, Scott, you're not writing a story here. I said, Dad, you're wrong. He said, what do you mean by that? Because now he wants to know what I'm thinking about. Dad, the more detail I write this, the more comfortable the customer is, and the post close is a heck of a lot easier to finish it off when they know they're getting truly what they paid for, instead of writing a bland contract with a bunch of loopholes in it. And when he began to see that my deals are canceling, do you think this guy was going to question me? He didn't realize that Robert Redford may be considered the natural. I'm the unnatural. Okay. I said, I took sales to a much different animal. They say, hey, listen, Dad, the reality is you and my brother didn't think I could do it in the first place. And my mom said if we could, she shut the place down for a minute. Say, he's got to sell Mickey, and that's about it. And you know what? My brother and my dad had to eat crow because I proved my mother right. And they finally realized there's more to this guy than just the old journalist guy that was out here, because he has certain techniques which are probably far different than what's normally taught on the road. In fact, I'll even take it a step further. In the alarm business, I had one of those, how those Foreman clipboards are, how they open up and down.
Yeah.
Rather than a lot of those people that would go out there and show the keypad, I would take a couple of their brochures and cut them up and fill my top, the back and the front on it. And the guy says, why are you doing this? Because I don't want to be bothered with some stupid key. I'd rather go out there and just show it to them. Let's go to the scoreboard. Boom, it's right funny, and that's it. And I call that my cheat sheet. The guy said, I've never seen anything like this before. As it turns out, I was one of his better salespeople, and he learns, wow, I can't believe you did this either. But not about me. But I'm just trying to give you some ideas, since this
I love it,
that we can exchange information, and you'll have the opportunity to listen to the show and watch it all you want. And maybe knowing you're one of those guys that'll watch the show and take notes 5-10 times and then put it in your repertoire. And if you do, more power to you, Johnny. So I just want to get those stories out. I never have a chance to do it unless I got a guy like you on. And then you're opening up the yesteryear portion of the broadcast. Go ahead.
Happy to help you get those stories out. Now, to your other question though about my the area that I service. So certainly I'm located in Palm Beach County. I'm in Palm Beach Gardens, and I have clients in the area. We met at a chamber event. I'm pretty active with the Palm Beach North Chamber up here, and that's great. And obviously that's, I've got a pool of candidates that I draw from here. It's where I have like my relationships. Like I said, I've lived here in South Florida for 22 years now. But the nice thing about this business is that I'm not limited. Like, somebody doesn't have to come and meet me personally in order to do business. And so I got a call from a law firm out in San Francisco. I was able to help them in an emergency basis, very quickly fill some open positions. And so, I mean, we can do business we can help businesses all over the country fill open spots. And I actually have a network of recruiters that I can call into action to help, accelerate that process as well.
Yeah. So you're telling me you can go ahead and do remote interviews is what you can do by taking advantage of the Zoom technology, right?
Yeah. Zoom, even the phone, honestly, like there's a fair amount that you can get done a number of different ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I try to not skin a cat because I got two of them, but I understand the analogy. The only cat analogy I ever use is Morris, who has 9 lives. I'm trying to make the most of the one that I have. So, but if you're going to bring a cat analogy, you're going to get one back. Hey, listen, man, I'll bet you're getting more than you bargained for on this show, aren't you, John?
You're a rascal, Scott, but I'm in for it.
Oh, that's good stuff, man. All right, so let's talk about the fact that you tailor solutions to fit clients' needs. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah. So, different businesses have different expectations of how this process is going to go, and they have different challenges that they're trying to overcome. I mentioned that law firm, like they were looking for speed. They had an emergency. They needed it solved yesterday. And so, as it happens, it was, we were able to snap into action and call in some additional resources and really put a lot of effort into filling that spot. One of the first recruiting jobs I filled, I had a client who had the last 4 people he had in this key role had all fallen out for different reasons. And so they were sort of like, their confidence was shook. They felt like they had a bad picker, and they really wanted help, not just in the finding of the candidates, but really getting intensively involved in the screening of them. And so I actually sat in on the interviews and really, steered the interview process in the final selection. So, went right from identifying the candidates, screening them, scheduling the interviews, and then, really leading and kicking off those interviews so that they felt a little bit more confident in the selection process and that they were getting the right person.
All right. So your objective, you say, is to solve hiring problems and match the talent with the jobs. I found that interesting. So tell me more about that.
Well, out there, everybody is, this is a tough job market. There, a lot of businesses, as we know, are struggling to find people, and for business owners, that a lot of times, like they're focusing on what they're best at, and a lot of times that's not, all these different, techniques and channels that you can use to find people. And when push comes to shove, I have the ability, like I can sit down, I can just pick up the phone and talk to candidates, and most business owners, like they're really pressed for time. They don't have that same ability. And the people that are applying for jobs, a lot of them are not, resume experts. The average resume gets looked at for 6 seconds. So I do something crazy, Scott. And when I have, applicants coming in, or, looking at the resume, I pick up the phone and I call them. And it's old fashioned, but it works. I take the time to talk to each candidate. And if they're not a fit for the job that I'm looking for, I commit to the fact that I'm going to try and find them something that will be a fit for them. And that's not something I can do anything like, batting 1,000, but it is something where I've found, it's a relationship business. And so, you may not be a fit for this job that I'm trying to fill now, but maybe the next job down the road or one after that will be a fit for you. And in that way we can, match the talent to the opportunity. That's where I'm coming from there.
So if I heard you correctly, you say the average resume is actually looked at for 6 seconds. That's it.
That's what studies show. Yeah. And so, all these different things they talk about putting on the resume, all this different information, like people are generally scanning for a couple things. They want to see what your job tenure was, did you have 3 jobs in the last year? That's generally going to count against you, right? Like they want to see 2 years or more in each job for the last several jobs. And then they're looking at, job title and company to see if they could even, tell what it is that you did, if it's applicable to what they're doing. And then they begin to, drill down onto skills and see that you're meeting the qualifications for the position. So, really and truly what people are looking at for is there anything on here that I can exclude you for, right? So if I'm looking at John Brandes's resume and I see that he doesn't have a law degree, like, well, right away you're moving right off the pile onto the next thing, right? So it's very quick and easy, often, quick and and reckless almost, because often there's diamonds in the rough that you're not finding. That's what I find.
All right, so let's go back. You make an interesting point. Job tenure, 3 jobs within how long?
Well, that was an example of a bad example, right? But if a lot of people move around, especially younger folks, we're finding are changing jobs more often.
So would you say within the last year or two? Can you?
I do see some folks that have had they've changed jobs multiple times in a year. That that can be a red flag for employers that this person is not able to perform in the job, right? That's a signal that people are looking at it in resumes for sure.
And then you also said that 2 years, at least they're looking for at least 2 years on a job, right?
Yeah, I find the hiring managers that I'm working with often they want to see some consistency in your prior job tenure. Yeah.
Interesting. So I'll tell you what, folks, you're looking for a job, I encourage you to go ahead and check this broadcast out as often as you need, because this will be the one thing you can do to make sure if you have had an inconsistent history, trying to clean it up a little bit so that you can indeed have an opportunity. So let's talk about your fee schedule. What type of a fee schedule do you have for your clients?
Well, it's important to say, Scott, I don't charge anything to the people seeking jobs,
Okay.
right? So they don't pay. I get paid by the employer. And of course, the fees are, flexible and negotiable, but generally speaking, it's 20% of the annual compensation. So, depending on what someone is going to make in the role is going to be what drives the fee. And then I'm dealing with small businesses. So there's flexible arrangements there. We can arrange for payment over time, and they only pay for the service if it's successful.
So how long does that 20% of the annual compensation, a couple of years or 1 year or what?
No, just it's an up. If they're paying at hiring, it's just the one-time fee for the first year.
Okay, well that was what I was asking for the first year. Okay.
Yeah, and then if I have had some situations where we arrange payment over time, and then we're breaking down that fee over a series of months.
Very good. Okay, so what inspired you to get in the business?
It's interesting. So I had, as I mentioned, kind of a long career, and I was feeling kind of like, it was time to move on and do something else. And I'd actually gone through a job search myself and wasn't really, feeling good about the way that process went. I was a chief revenue officer of a sales organization overseeing multiple brands. And, despite going through, the resume coaches and all the rest, I applied to a number of jobs and didn't get really much traction in that process at all. And so I didn't really set out to, transform the recruiting process or anything else. I just, really initially what I started out to do with my business was to do sales consulting. But I just kept getting pulled in the direction of recruiting. I had, colleagues and friends and businesses reaching out to me to see if I could help find, this person or that person. And, about halfway through my first year in business, I looked and I saw that, 75% of my revenue was coming from recruiting. And so I kind of took a pivot at that point and figured I should focus in on that. And, I do like it. I get to meet lots of different people. I get to learn a lot about, different businesses and different job functions. And it's a blast. It's really not something, it's something I really fell backwards into. I didn't set out to do this, but it's been really rewarding and something that I'm frankly proud to be a part of.
Well, it's amazing when we talk about your background and mine, how they parallel a little bit. You say that you've been in the business for 20 years and on your own for a year, where in my case, I've been in sports media for 43 years, and I decided to take on a daunting challenge of starting my own media company. And I enjoy that because I took advantage of the fact that the newspaper industry is dying. Okay.
Yeah.
And when it's dying and you're going to digital, then I wanted to take on a dimension myself where, what are you going to get at a typical newspaper? Well, you're going to just get written content. I decided to turn this into a multi-faceted platform. We go audio, visual, and then written content. So you get 3 for the price of 1, all wrapped into one particular project. And I think what admires me about your background is we mirror each other in different ways. So you took something and then you turn it into a passion, and then you became an entrepreneur along the way. And now this is what you're doing on a regular basis, like I've done. You think anybody's going to hire a 60-year-old man busted up? Probably not. And now I don't ever have to worry about asking for my vacation time at all, because I'm pretty much dictating my own schedule. But just because you do that doesn't mean that you're not going to work the job 24/7 if you have to talk about people, on the West Coast and all that stuff. So, to me, there's a different set of challenges doing it. But the main thing is you're passionate about what you do. That's one of the reasons I gravitated to you from the beginning when you told me what you're doing. And that's why I'm glad that we were able to bring this podcast to not only audio visual, but again, we'll be able to plan other projects down the line as time goes. So I respect a lot of what you're doing. And I'll tell you what, I don't bring on, John, just about anybody to come on here. I don't. I filter through all the requests. I get a lot of them. A lot of them I don't agree to take on. Some of them I do. It's all based on instinct. So I'll let you go. I'll ask you this one more question or two. Do you value a lot of your things based on instinct? About does instinct drive your business?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have a ton of hard facts about the way other recruiters or other headhunters might operate. So to your point, yeah, absolutely. I think instincts and I do have a solid base of experience that I'm drawing from, but it's not specific to the way things have always been done. And so it's funny. I've reviewed thousands of resumes in my career and in this business now at this point too. I don't consider myself a resume expert, right? Like there are people out there that they're very skilled at that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like art, I don't know art, but I know what I like. And so generally speaking, that's my reaction on the resume side of things. Like it is, going off instinct. Like, is this catching the eye? Is it communicating the information properly? Yeah. So I'm the kind of guy that likes to shoot from the hip.
Well, I'm a gunslinger, as you can hardly tell. The main thing is instinct drives me all the way. I follow my instincts, I deal with my experience, and then I go to my connections, and there's my secret to trying to get things done. And finally, how can everybody reach you, John?
Yeah, so probably the best thing would be salesbountyhunter.com. So just that simple, salesbountyhunter.com.
All right, well, let me go over things one more time in case you're joining us. I'm working with John Brandes, the Sales Bounty Hunter. The audio version of the South Florida Tribune podcast can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Contribute in the chat room. That's one way to do it. Also send topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, call me at 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And on Twitter, you can reach us at Tribune South. And once again, our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. And once again, Candy Ebling is the mastermind behind getting it all done. So, John, it's been a pleasure having you on the show tonight. And I hope that this opportunity to talk on a nationwide, worldwide level jumpstarts your business a lot. So thank you very much for joining us, John.
Scott, thanks for all that you do, and I really appreciate it. You're a man of your word.
Thank you. Well, it is important to be, but I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you, John.